Hi everyone, this video is going to be a little bit different. We've recently got the Mini back from the paint shop, and while the front is stripped down, I wanted to show you a little project that I've been working on the side, and that is a custom front bumper bar for the classic square front Mini. So the front of the square front Mini, or often called the Mini Clubman, was designed by the same designers who designed the Ford Escort. And it's quite a good looking front, and it really brought the Mini from a late 50s looking car right into the 70s. So they really squared up the front of the car. They changed a few things, other things around the car, like the tail lights, for example, and made it more of a 70s vehicle.
During the late 1960s, when the square front Mini was designed, BMC was exploring all sorts of ideas when it came to redesigning one of the most successful models. The images I'm showing here are just some of the prototypes that were developed during that time, and include some interesting bumper options, including a much more modern plastic bumper in one of the shots. Some were quite creative and may have been successful, but others not so much, and I think we're lucky the Mini essentially retained its original basic design and proportions, and the Australian Mini, in fact, continued to use what was essentially the Mark I core body all the way through to its final production year in 1978, which is the build year of my green car.
So one of the things that I think they really could have done a lot better on was the bumper bar design, and it's something that I think is fairly straightforward to get right, and there's the right bones or the right shape at the front of this car to make it look really good. So this is the standard Leyland Mini bumper bar, or square front Mini bumper bar, and it's pretty straightforward. As you can see, it's just basically a slightly shaped piece of steel that wraps around the front of the car, but doesn't really wrap all that closely. It also sticks out a fair bit. It's quite chunky, and to me the design of that bumper bar didn't really complement the front of this car very well. You've got a very tall front of the car, you've got this band through the middle, and then you've got this thin bumper bar, and that didn't really work for me. So I've always been looking for something that's a little more integrated, a little more modern, or further into the 70s, more like some of the Japanese cars.
Here's a few examples of the factory-fitted square front Mini bumper. In my opinion, a bit flat, a bit plain, a bit simple, and just not making the most of the front-end design of the car.
Now, I don't think it looks that bad, the bumper bar. It's okay. I just think it could look a lot better. And when you put underriders on the car, so these little underriders you can get that bolt on here under the bumper, that helps the design a bit and makes it look a bit more complete. But again, it's something else that I was looking for, and I just haven't been able to find anything out there that people have made. There are custom bumper bars out there, but I haven't been able to find anything that looks really 1970s organic, proper for the car.
And here's some examples of what's out there. There's some pretty cool custom stuff that people have designed, from the extreme Zeemax style body kits through to some more simple and conservative designs. The problem I find with most of these body kit designs out there is that they're applying 80s and 90s body kit styling to a 1960s shell, and while it does look really good in some cases, there's never any mistaking it for the factory original fitting. Instead, what I'm aiming to do is create a more contemporary design that's fitting for the time, something that could well have been produced and applied by BMC during the 1970s. And what has really inspired the idea for this bumper bar is the huge range of great designs that were out there from the 1970s. And as I mentioned before, a lot of these came from the Japanese manufacturers, but also some Australian and US cars of the era also had great designs. The RX series Mazdas, Datsun Skylines, 1200s, and many others, and of course the first generation Toyota Celica, all had really great, nicely integrated bumper bars. My absolute favourite from the era would have to be the bumpers that Toyota applied to the MS70 or MS75 Crown Coupe, which you can see on screen now. The way that the bumpers are almost a flush panel with the car, although not particularly practical from a safety or protection perspective, was really forward thinking in its look and made the front and back end look really sleek. But it wasn't just the Japanese. Even the US cars of the early 70s had some great designs before the impact bumper regulations came into effect. A couple that come to mind are the AMC AMX and the Dodge Dart. Australian muscle cars also had some good looking bumpers applied. The Valiant Charger and Ford Falcon, a couple of examples shown on screen.
So part of the design I really like, the way this comes down and curves up, that isn't at all taken into account, that shape with the standard bumper bar on the Leyland Mini. And also the standard bumper bar only wraps around about this far. On most 70s cars you get more of an organic wraparound, and the angles are more complementing to the corner of the car, and that's what I wanted to achieve with a custom bumper bar. Now along the front of the car as well, there's a lot of opportunities to complement the overall design. You've got quite a tall design for the front of the car, tall flat design, and instead of having something thin running across the front of it, I thought it would be better to have a thicker or deeper bumper bar. And the design of this front end sheet metal is perfectly suited for something to do that. You've got obviously your lights here which need to be taken into account, but you've got these lines, this band that runs all the way across, then you've got your number plate mounting all the way around the end. So that entire shape, these lines here and this line along the base of the grille, is what I really wanted to take into account and almost fill up to make it look like a factory option on the car. And the standard bumper bar doesn't do that, so I've decided to build one that really integrates well and brings the car even more so into the 70s and makes it better looking.
So before I had the Mini painted, I bought some chalk and started to mark up some ideas on the front end panels, and these photos show how I got started and approximately the shape that I wanted. As I mentioned before, I wanted to make sure that the design incorporated the natural front end apron band that runs parallel between the base of the indicator lamps and the base of the grille frame. It looked okay in 2 dimensions in chalk, but it was always going to be hard to tell what looked good until I started actually building the shape onto the car and getting a 3D perspective. After setting out the design on the car, the sketch shown on screen is the basic design I settled on, after a bit of playing around in Photoshop. I'd initially started to create this design in SolidWorks, using that to create a mold design with the intention to vacuum form the bumper. But in the end, I settled for the old-fashioned method of clay shaping and a lot of sanding. More on that whole process and the final product in the next episode.
So instead of this chunky standard bumper bar that sort of sits here and sticks out way too far, I decided to come up with something custom. Now this one obviously has been painted black, and they're normally chrome or metal finish. So I've come up with this, and this is the first prototype of it. It's turned out quite well shape-wise, mounts on your standard points of the Mini, and really takes into account those lines that I was talking about and the shapes that I was talking about, integrates with your front parking lights and indicators, and really hugs closer to the front of the car. And I think it looks a lot more organic, a lot more comparable to the designs that were being done in the 1970s with the Japanese cars, where they were going to a lot more effort in terms of attention to detail. So as you can see, just slipping this bumper over, this is the standard one, a little bit of wraparound, but it sticks out quite a bit at the front as well. Too much for my liking, doesn't really integrate so well with the car's front. Swap that over with my new custom fiberglass bumper bar, and it's a little different. It wraps around nicely, hugging the front of the car, and complements the angle of the wheel arch there on the side, and curves back down under the front of the car as well, so it sort of gives it that aerodynamic integrated look. So this new bumper bar needs a fair bit of finishing off. There's a few different things I'm going to do with it to get it up to standard and ready to fit to the car. But this is a 2-part series video, and to see how I made this bumper bar, the full construction process and how I came up with the design, please subscribe and look out for the next one coming soon.